welcome back to our Crushing Comics Book Club, reading Grant Morrison's Batman. We are here today to read a sequence of 4 issues, starting from Batman 672 and going through Batman 675. Now, if you've been reading along in the Batman by Grant Morrison Omnibus, Volume 1, which we suggest you do, it collects all of this stuff, you may have already read issues 670 and 671. They are part of a larger crossover called The Resurrection of Ra's al Ghul. We're going to read that separately in an episode soon to come. But right now we're just charging forward. This next arc doesn't necessarily refer to that all that much. And as it has been collected prior to the omnibus, they didn't always collect those 2 interstitial issues. So we're just forging forward with these issues. Clearly, we're going to spoil some details of the plot in these issues, but we're going to try not to get ahead of ourselves to further plots deeper into the Morrison run. And as a reminder, Grant Morrison relatively recently has let everyone know that their pronouns are they, them. And so we are going to use those pronouns as any respectful person would. And if we make a mistake, we are just going to correct ourselves and move forward. As when you make a mistake about someone's pronouns, you just do so in a respectful way. And it's not really about you and your mistake. And we're going to do our best to honor that as well. We now come back to Bruce Wayne trying to be Bruce Wayne here in Batman 672. He's really focused on his jet-setter life with Jet, and there's definitely the feeling that he's starting to authentically feel something. Like, I feel like at first she was kind of his cover, his beard, but now he actually is caring a little bit. But he can't stop being Batman, and the third Batman has shown up. And this third Batman has it in for the Gotham City Police Department, and quite specifically has it in for Gordon. And so Batman has to tear himself away from a base jumping philanthropy date with Jet to go and be Batman. We'll get to what happens at the end of this issue as we get into the next issue. Harry, what do you think about this whole Bruce Wayne and Batman life that he's living here? Do you think he genuinely cares about Jet?
Yes, I think he does. But as much as this person can, which I think is a very important qualifier there, because, you know, he's clearly doing this and like continuing it to a level because he's invested, but there is always going to be a limit to how much he can emotionally invest because he has another job beating up criminals. So, you know, it's just a different situation for him. It's an interesting like kind of walk towards normalcy that, as we're going to see very soon, might get disrupted in a pretty major way. But it is nice to see the guy making the old college try.
Free, what do you think about this Bruce Wayne romance?
I mean, unless it's Selena, Kyle, and Talia, I'm like, I don't buy it. Get it out of here. Get it out of my page.
Get out of here.
Yeah, so I think it's one of those things. I don't think he necessarily cares about Jezebel. I mean, cares in the sense like, okay, he's not a total douche. I mean, he just cares about another person. But the thing is, like, I think he's feeling like, oh, this can work. I can make this work, right? Like, you know, I can be a normal person. I think it kind of works from that point of view, but I don't necessarily buy it if it's anything more than that, you know. And it's also because I read Batman already.
I had this moment here where like he does seem to genuinely care what she thinks about him, and I think that continues throughout this arc and especially at the end of it. But it's almost like if he's going to start caring what someone else thinks about him, he has to eventually let them in on him being Batman. Like, it just doesn't work. He can't have somebody who really cares about him and his opinion in the long term, who doesn't. We've seen it like in his personal life. Everybody who he actually cares about their opinion at some point finds out he's Batman, except for Commissioner Gordon, who only cares about him as Batman, really, right? So it kind of just made me like really wonder, you know, does Bruce Wayne go into relationships with like a long goal plan? Like, if I should actually fall in love with this human being, will I eventually tell them that I'm Batman? But that might be a conversation for another time. I don't know, Harry.
Well, it's interesting because just to kind of, you know, gear up for these shows, I've just been reading and watching all more Batman, and I actually just finished The Dark Knight and earlier this morning, and Batman Begins yesterday, and that series is totally different, where there Bruce Wayne is very invested in actually being with Maggie Gyllenhaal, Rachel Dawes, and quitting being Batman. That is like the one Batman story where I believe that he is so invested in a relationship. Yeah, he actually wants to. Stuff like this, it really does feel more like at best someone going through the motions or someone kind of just putting up a facade. So yeah, I mean, it's just, I won't lie, this is not like the most interesting part of Batman to me. I feel like we've kind of like well established that like he cannot fully commit to other humans unless they're like cat people or like assassin daughters or what have you. So I don't know.
But that's his
you know,
life. It's kind of like when
yeah,
you fall in love with somebody, like, and you only share a small intersection of your life with them. It's like, what are they going to do about the you that you are for the other however many percent
yes.
of your life? You know,
Well, no, I
they
mean,
have to at least
Freehan,
appreciate it.
yeah, that's right. I mean, Freehan nailed it. Like he's, unless it's with them, like I don't fully buy it. I just don't.
Yeah,
Now,
and it's also like he's just dating her, right? Like he's not sure yet. Maybe he'll change his mind if the date goes on, like for a longer time. But
Maybe.
at this time he's figuring it out, and that's okay. It's okay to figure it out for his
Okay.
dating corner.
Yeah. All right. We're learning.
now this proceeds to, so he gets diverted by the bat signal thrown up from the Gotham City Police. And so he diverts his base jumping off of the hot air balloon. Morrison always finds a way to inject some golden and silver age ridiculousness, even in the middle of a pretty grim and tough story.
Mhm.
So he jumps onto the roof and he fights this other Batman. And this other Batman just really gets the drop on him, and Gordon shoots him. And even as he's also shooting Gordon, Batman has a heart attack, and a number of interesting things happen in quick sequence, which sets up the other issues in this run, which I think we'll go way more deeply into than this first one.
Yes.
He has a vision of a giant bat as he dies, as I would hope he would, honestly. He hears the magic words Zur-En-Arrh, which Harry, I'm sure, will have some things to say about. And also he sees Batmite. Harry, take it away.
I love all of this so much. Everything you just described is super important for the upcoming story, RIP. So we can't get into exactly what that all means just yet, but this is, and in particular, Batmite here. What I love about this is that, these are things that we all just read in the Black Case book, pretty explicit in that. And these are mixing this part of the Batman, of Morrison's Batman story, where he's taking like this insidious, like hell Batman, who, I'll be honest, I know it's kind of like a basic costume, but I like that costume a lot. Like the mask faceplate and the red eyes. And it's taking these golden age concepts and just mixing them with just this hellish nightmare, fever nightmare kind of like trappings or feelings about it. And it just gets me really excited. I mean, the coolest thing about Batman, we'll get into it later, talking about the, I believe the fifth dimension or the sixth dimension. But like, anyway, you see like Batman is a construct and there is an actual creature working him from behind.
That was, I was like really freaked out by that because I didn't remember the implications of that, and I don't think we need to spoil them. Clearly you can see this gremlin thing hanging onto him, and I was just like, WTF.
Well, it's like that's its actual, that's its actual appearance, and Batmite is just this.
It's just this comforting
design.
Look at exactly. Look at the birdie.
Like, don't look. And I love these because like the art. I mean, they don't even do like a good job at hiding it. You just see this creature like grabbing onto Batmite. It just, and also I do want to also say, like Tony Daniel, who's an artist I'm hot and cold on. I do really like his art here and into RIP because it's just like very classic superheroic stuff, but it gets like this very grim kind of aesthetic and undercurrent very well. So I really, this is like around, I'm just like vibing so hard with these issues. I really like these.
Freya, are you vibing so hard with Batmite and Zur-En-Arrh and Heart Attack here?
I am vibing.
Okay, guys, we're having fun, huh?
So we talked about like the issue 30 and 47 from 52.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yeah,
that we did not kind of discuss before, but that kind of comes into place over here. And I want to say that the issue that's called Joe Chill in Hell, I got the actual issue number. This is one of my favorite single issue ever. So I have very specific things that I look for when it's like come to be like a single one issue. The other one is Lucifer 56, I believe 56 or 58. It's called the Yahweh Dance. So the thing is that the issue itself, that is a different issue, but this one I kind of love the idea of like it's a fever dream. It's told in a fever dream. It is supposed to be a fever dream because he's kind of having a heart attack, and then there's a lot of flashback, flash forward, a lot of different things going on, and you're not sure whether this is happening, like what's real, what's not, and it's very told in a very cinematic way that is very few comic writer slash artist, like plus artist can pull through. And this is kind of done in a very, like, for me it was done in a perfect way, and I loved that the Joe Chill suffering, and it kind of reminded me of that the first Batman story, like
Exactly.
the first Batman,
Exactly.
where it's like the so I thought that for some reason this is the same mobster, and I was kind of disappointed that it wasn't, but that this mobster doesn't remember anymore, and that Batman is just kind of haunting him, but it wasn't that. But the thing is, I absolutely kind of loved that it kind of called back to that time, and then it just kind of, the story is kind of rolling forward.
This issue is particularly like, it's a dream sequence, but also there is a fifth dimension demon in here. And also, like, is this real? Is this an interpretation? Is this something that he's imagining while he is unconscious with his heart attack? But then also it's starting to reveal the real plot with Dr. Hurt and the deprivation chamber, which is not even really like, it's not even like it's like the main focus of the issue. I mean, it is for us, but like it's not even like it's like taking forefront in like the actual pages and paneling. So you just have like this mishmash of like actual plot and like fever dream like interpretations and who knows what, but you're kind of, this experience he's feeling is revealing all of these memories and this darkness that he experienced with the sleep deprivation that's slowly bleeding in as the issue goes on. And it's just really cool.
The Blam, and with the Batman that is like the first appearance Batman, that looks like first appearance Batman, took my breath away.
It's really good, and because
the way it works in the omnibus, that is like a next page, and you're like, duh, it's like in your face, and I just love it.
This is an insidious feeling issue. There's like, it feels wrong, which is that's just like a hard thing to bottle. It's just very cool that happened.
So much to say. So first of all, I want to echo Fariha that we said that we'd be coming back to those two kind of slices of stories from the beginning of the omnibus, one of which is 52, the series number 47. And we see Tim Drake basically sitting outside of this cave indefinitely as Batman is inside. And I think if you hadn't read that story, maybe this would be a little bit more confusing. And I have read this in the past without having read that or any of Casebook, but this Thogel ritual that he's talking about is that ritual. And that ritual itself is also reflective of his deprivation tank ritual from Batman 156. So I think this is one of those issues where if you haven't done the Morrison pre-reading, I could think that maybe it comes off a little bit extra disorienting, or maybe because you don't know how much he's making up in the moment, how much is his life flashing before his eyes, and how much is semi-canonical. And I think as I was going through and outlining it, I took the most notes on this issue of everything we read today. I think it's actually almost all canonical except for one brief future glimpse, but I only know that because I read that 52 issue and I read Black Casebook. He's recalling a lot of his early training. Alfred's insisting he keeps a record of everything. Funny, it's in an A4 notebook, which is like a very Commonwealth country paper size. At one point he glimpses his own funeral, so he's definitely getting visions that are both forward and backwards here. He sees Batmite. At one point we're in the Batcave and there's multiple Robin costumes, including a young lady's version of the Robin costume, which I think says some things about continuity here. But we really dig into the layers under that Batman 156 deprivation tank story. If we go back and take it literally, at the time, Batman is like, I just wanted to put myself through this test that the astronauts would put themselves through. And Dr. Hurt's like, yes, we were testing the astronauts to test Batman. But there's like layers and layers introduced as we go through these issues. And clearly we're doing a little bit of referring to the next two issues too here, is that Batman was actually doing it to get into the Joker's head. But also it kind of makes you think about the training that he went through to become Batman too, because he definitely went through some like deprivation and meditation as well. So it definitely like creates this kind of string of pearls in the story of like Batman occasionally needs to just deprive himself of everything in order to understand himself, and also in order to understand what he's fighting. But then at the same time, there's this layer of like Dr. Hurt was just doing it to try to learn something about Batman, which we're going to get into in a second. I have more to talk about too, but let's just take a breath because that was a lot of Peter. Fariha, did you want to get something in there?
So it's that the whole like deprivation and rebirth was also connected to how Joker comes back in like, the Joker's the prose story that
Yeah.
we talked about, because
Well-
it was kind of very much connected to that aspect of it as well.
Well,
Which
it's
I was
also
like,
playing on the Lazarus Pits. I mean, DC
Yep.
Rebirth has
Mhm.
always been a DC word, even before DC did DC Rebirth in 2016. I mean, even the beginning of Geoff Johns' Green Lantern was called Rebirth. And so it's like one of those DC words. And I think Morrison is really just playing with the idea of like, what is rebirth? Does it literally mean being brought back from the dead? Is it being on the brink of death? If you deprivate yourself from all outside input and wants and cares, are you effectively dead? Does that allow you to be reborn? I mean, there's definitely some concepts he's pulling in from some different religious and philosophical beliefs around the world here that really ask, like, what is death? What is the death of self here? And how many times has Batman potentially died? And you both described this as a fever dream. I really saw this as kind of life flashing before your eyes in a moment where you die, which maybe we're using interchangeably, because this Joe Chill stuff is not canonical, right? Like,
that's my point.
This is Batman's fantasy. Like, it's almost like every time he revisits Joe Chill, that's just him capturing some other bad guy. But on some level, Batman's just going back to haunt Joe Chill. That's Joe Chill's hell, but it's also Batman's hell.
The fact that the main, go on for it, sir.
No, I mean, that's why I keep on saying that it's a fever dream, because something didn't happen to him,
but some of it did happen. Well, that's
maybe
like the main crux is like this fun like
and he
old
didn't
school,
write it in the notebook, so
the case book. The fact that it's such a mix of like things that we know have happened with things that we're pretty sure haven't happened, but then there are things that are intrinsic to this plot, and then there are future ideas, and then Batmite's there. Like, it gives like such a feeling of instability, but not in a sloppy way. I feel like this is like the hardest line to walk, but like the feeling of uncertainty and shapelessness almost of that book and this kind of like this plot is one of my favorite things of all of these comics.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those issues that sometimes I can be hard on Morrison, because I'm like, they are purposely trying to be obscure and confusing. Like, I read their Green Lantern run that just concluded a few times. I mean, there's good aspects of it. There's really cool aspects of it, but there are points that it is obscure to be obscure, and you cannot convince me of anything else. I don't think this issue is there obscure to be obscure at all. I think the more you learn about the inputs to this run and the outputs of this run, the more this makes sense until it becomes crystalline in its clearness.
This was one of the issues I was really curious how the both of you felt, actually, because this is the kind of thing where it can be looked at. It could be considered indulgent, but you're right. Like, there is a method here, and there's a thoughtfulness beyond just trying to be obtuse.
Oh no, I love when heroes are going through fever dream. I love that. I live for that.
Right.
Like, anytime there's like it's like kind of like you're not sure, and the time is like flashing forward, backward, and you cannot hold on to it. I really love those issues. Like, it's one of my, like, I don't know, I just really love that type of storytelling. And I think comic media is the only media that you can do it. Like, you cannot do it in prose. It's nearly impossible. But
because prose, you can't trick the reader as much. Like, you're still relying on the prose to tell you something accurately, and it's you don't want it to lie to you. I mean, it can be done. I've read prose that does it. It's way harder. Yeah,
it's like a useful detachment you can do with comics in a way.
Now, both of you mentioned that great blam full page splash, but actually the thing that hit me the hardest on this read of the issue were the 2 panels that came after that, maybe 3 panels. He says, but Thogel ended last year. He's squinting his eyes. He's starting to come back to himself. He's realizing that he was in a fever dream. The isolation chamber experiments were years ago. When did I die? Which is really what made me think through this whole, when did I die? When did he die? Did he, in the next one, he says, my God, I had a heart attack on the roof. You saved my life. But he doesn't say, I died and you saved my life. He's asking, when did I die about himself? He's asking, when did I die about this Bruce Wayne that he cannot figure how to get back? Did he kill that Bruce Wayne in Thogel? Or did he find him again? Did he kill that Bruce Wayne in the isolation chamber? When did he kill him? When did he die? When did I die?
That's like the story answer every Batman writer tries to answer.
True.
I think there's
there's a thesis statement for everyone. Depending on who you read, they will tell you either it's the day that his parents were killed, the day he did his first supervision, or the day he decided not to kill, let Joe go. It's like different aspect of it. I think
we have a
Lego
ways.
Batman had the perfect answer.
What was the answer?
You have to watch.
Okay, I'll watch Lego Batman. I mean, we have a ways to go, but I do love that this series is asking questions and starting a journey that ends in really interesting places, much for down the road. Because there's definitely a through line between this and two wildly different acts that follow this, but it's all still the same series. So I'm very satisfied right now as a person. So this is good for me.
Well, I want to ease us into talking about 674. And we've already kind of referred to it a little bit. Batman puts things together here. He understands who the third Batman is. He understands who the three Batmen are because of his life flashing before his eyes or fever dream, whatever we're talking about it. So now let's talk about the other side of that deprivation chamber experiment. Dr. Hurt repeated it on a series of willing policemen volunteers because he is trying to produce another Batman. He's trying to produce another Batman that he can have some kind of control over. He didn't just observe Batman's life signs during that experiment. He examined Batman's brainwaves, Batman's reactions. He learned as much about Batman as Batman did himself, and now he's trying to create it. And his three creations, are they flawed or are they intentional, right? We have the first one who's a cop with a gun who just walked right up and shot the Joker, pretty effective compared to Batman in some ways. We have the second one who is Bane Batman, who basically is just like a monster of his own creation, pretty reflective of Batman in some ways. Mm-hmm. And then we have this third one who's almost like a full-on Joker or Riddler style supervillain.
Like a hell Batman.
Yeah, which is also Batman. Like, did he fail? Really? These are three pretty authentic Batman that he turned out.
I mean, that's the biggest question, right? I mean, they are in certain kinds of efficacy and like outward, talents, but like there is for all of the replication, like these Batman all crack in various ways. They crumble to become like savage monsters, like the Bane. They become this kind of like henchman hell demon, like the third one. And then the first one we don't see much, but obviously, he wasn't doing great himself. So there's like this there's this singular, like enduring ability that Bruce Wayne has that they can't crack and they can't replicate. And that's definitely something that gets explored really, really soon, actually. So this is definitely something that kind of gets echoed later.
Fariha?
So it's like the Captain America replication, right? Like it's like you cannot create another Captain America because Steve was something different. Like it was Steve made Captain America, and now you can only pass the title on. You cannot create another super soldier. So it's kind of like the idea of that, because it's just like there is a secret sauce to being Bruce Wayne. And even though Dr. Hart kind of cracks that, saying that the trauma makes him, but it's not necessarily that. It has to be something that you cannot create a Batman in that way. So it's nearly impossible. And it's
it also makes me think a lot about
is that idea.
Yeah.
It also makes me think a lot about the process of blowing glass, and that when you take the glass right out of the forge and it's super hot, it's incredibly malleable for a time, and you can shape it, you can squeeze it, you can pull it like taffy. And that, these are things that you cannot do to glass when it gets cooled down. But also when the glass cools down, the things you put it through when it was malleable have an effect on the stability it has when it cools too. Is it going to be harder to crack, easier to crack? Is it going to be, can you pick it up by certain angles without it falling apart? And that it's very much a story about Bruce Wayne. Like, people are trying to make another Batman without wondering what made the man who became Batman. Batman didn't happen fully formed. He had 10 years of resiliency between his parents dying and Batman, and that's really important to who he is as Batman. And that made me reflect on the way that he is treating Damian back in the Damian and Son, because the thing that he's doing as a mentor, as an adoptive father, is making sure that these boys, young men, young people with trauma get cooled down in a way that they don't totally crack. And you can almost see it in Jason Todd, that he like didn't get enough time with Jason Todd, and then Jason Todd put another trauma on top of it. And Batman, it's too late to fix it, like he can't repair it anymore. And so on one hand, you have these already adult men they're getting put through the Batman process, but it's like corrupting them in ways that maybe delight Dr. Hurt, but it's not making a Batman really. And then you have on the other side, is Damian too far along for Batman to like work this magic on? Or another really tough question, has Damian really had trauma? I mean, yes, because he's being raised in this brutal way, but not trauma in the way that he would recognize it, because to Damian, that's life. He's fine with it, None of the other, like Dick Grayson was fine that his parents died, like that's different. And so, Jason Todd's whole early life was trauma and, being not an orphan, but well, I guess he is kind of an orphan at points. So I don't know. I guess the ball of wax that I'm trying to tie up here is like, it's only trauma if you acknowledge that it's trauma, and you've got to have long enough to fix the trauma. That's maybe my theory. And that's what makes Batman, Batman. And what makes Captain America, quite frankly. And Peter Parker, Peter Parker.
Right. Like you cannot, I mean, that's one of the things, like, I think a lot of, I've read enough superhero runs now to kind of get to it. It's like, there's always been that one run. It's like, okay, we want to replicate this. Whether that's an insidious force trying to replicate it, whether it's that United States government trying to replicate it. In this case, this was kind of like, and I don't know. As I was reading it, I was like, okay, police force, militarized police force. I don't know about that. So the thing is, like, there's a lot. Like, it's like there's always this storyline, and then at the end of the day, you always come down to the same conclusion: is that heroes are not replicable. You cannot replicate the same thing. You can pass on the mental. That's different. But the reason, what makes Batman Batman, what makes Bruce Wayne Batman, what makes Steve Rogers Captain America, what makes Bruce Banner Hulk, cannot be replicated again. It has to be like other ways of passing on the mental. It cannot be. And to me, that is the power of superhero comics. I absolutely love it because of that. And that's one of the reasons every time there is a mental passing on, I am there to read that because it just shows the longevity of that character. It shows longevity of that hero title. It's amazing.
And I think that helped me maybe say the thing I wasn't saying before, and I'll put a little tag on that before I move us to an interstitial topic, which is that a lot of times Batman's villains, the problem is the trauma never did get healed, and then they're villains. People love to be like, oh, Batman's not so different than the villains, but that actually is the difference. And I think with Damian, it's kind of like what Batman realizes, and I think what we're going to see some other characters realize later in this run, is that you have to give him some sense of like joy and normalcy to make sure that he understands that thing that happened before his trauma, so that he can eventually heal the trauma, so that he eventually can be a better Batman. Well, if he's going to eventually be Batman, that's the overall arc that we're going through.
Yeah, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson were like open wounds that they had to work through. Damian is like emotionally stunted because he just doesn't understand things because he's been in such like a specialized environment. Like,
and if you force that person to just be Batman, they become a supervillain.
No, yeah. It's learning. He's got a weirdly more gentle arc where he's learning how to be more just like a compassionate human than working through pain, which is like kind of a interesting kind of contrast to his dad.
And I would be hard pressed if we were moving on from it without telling that the reason I actually learned to understand superhero from that way is from Irredeemable by Mark Waid, because the fundamental point of that is like, what makes Superman? Like, Superman is not made because he's Krypton. Superman is the way he is because he's Clark Kent. And it's that. So that has been like, since then, the way I've been looking at superhero has completely changed.
I love that.
Well, that's a perfect tee up for a question that I'm only aiming at Harry, which he might just give us a wink and a nod, because I think it has to do with things that are upcoming. Before we stop talking about 674, in one of his flashbacks, Bruce says that any kind of moment of weakness or blackout puts everyone at risk. So he must put away his Batman costume and retire from crime fighting. A Robin with him at that point, who I think is Dick Grayson, says no, but Batmite hovering over his shoulder says, I must put away my Batman costume and retire from crime fighting. Wonder who put that in your command in your head, Bruce? Come on, don't look so confused. You're only having a flashback.
This was so satisfying to read, and it was so satisfying to read one of the Black Casebook files that we read. Yeah, there's something going on deep in the subconscious right now that is all about the killing an ideal and killing something that is killing an idea, so to speak. So this is you're definitely onto something, and we will definitely get to it later. And I'm very excited to. Fariha might know what I'm talking about.
It's also no, I mean I kind of got a hint of it, but it's also kind of like the thesis statement of Dark Knight by Chris Nolan, that it's the idea, Batman as an idea.
You have to so basically this around this and Batman RAP came out, like, or at least I was reading that the exact same time Dark Knight hit, and that was like very important me forming my idea like what Batman is, like what this character is, which is an unyielding kind of symbol, which, is just, that's where my basis is for this character.
So we're going to roll into issue 675, which kind of stands apart from this arc in a way, but kind of is a little bit of puts a pin in the arc. So Jet and Bruce are at dinner, and Jet is like, you're clearly hiding something. You're always beat up. You're always disappearing. Hilariously, and in a moment I will always remember, she says, are you into S&M? Because she's not wrong. She's not totally wrong.
No, she's onto something.
Morrison is really exploring here how thin the veneer of Bruce on top of Batman seems the closer you get to Bruce. It's not a good paint job, right?
Yes.
He's not, and it goes back to the voice, the acting, to everything. His Bruce ain't great. You can see through it. Similarly, at the same time, Morrison is using Talia, who's observing all of this, to comment on Bruce's disposable women. She says they've all got these Bond girl alliterative names, and none of them understand him or love him like I do, because Talia is not looking at the Bruce Wayne veneer. She's appreciating Bruce Wayne by being able to see what's underneath of it. I think we kind of have covered this, so I don't know if I've descended around for discussion. I just think it's interesting how Morrison really just puts it on the page, straight up here.
What I love about this run, and it really picks up more in the third act, but for all of his positioning, Bruce Wayne and Batman is this super human who's just like this perfect design. He also is pretty fine pointing out the flaws and the weird cracks in this entire idea and just how flimsy Bruce Wayne is. Like, he's okay taking the piss out of this character, and like that, I think there's like an honesty and like a kind of like a tongue-in-cheekness there. It's never like overwhelming or overpowering, but there's always like he's willing to engage with the things of this character that don't fully click or don't hold up like incredibly well. I also want to say that the art in this issue is kind of bad, and I don't like the issue very much. That's me.
I really like the towards the end though, because when it's like Bruce Wayne is turning into Batman, it's like walk away.
But he looks like such a goblin in that scene. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, Batman is, but the thing is, I was actually like talking about the voice, and then that was like one place where it's like it came back to me. It's like when he says "walk away," I heard it in the gravelly voice. Like I did. It came back to that whole voice thing that we saw in the first issue of Morrison. That. Because I feel like at that point he stopped talking like Bruce Wayne, and then the Batman voice came out, and that gave Jezebel the thing. Like, okay, not just I don't think it's just the shadow or anything.
Yeah, I think she saw through the veneer for other reasons in that scene.
Yeah,
and it was the voice that got there. But then I also want to mention that I'm super uncomfortable in the number of people that knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And
I know. I was thinking that this time.
It just really annoys me. It's one of those things. I'm like, seriously.
This is not my favorite part of the run for reasons we're just going to have to get into later. Not to keep us on this, but also Damian Wayne looks like at least 18 in this.
He's drawn badly. When you draw young characters, you shouldn't put that in your face. Lines in the face age a character.
I don't know. It's interesting. It is like, it's a nice way of showing like they are like one and the same, Bruce and Batman. Like that's executed well. the stuff with Jezebel has never been like my whole favorite of this, but we're really just going to have to get into that next episode or further down the line.
Well, I think there's two things to pull out of this before we wrap it up. So one is that Dick and Tim are just making the rounds because Bruce is on a date. So it's up to Dick and Tim to take care of Gotham. And they're just having this casual chat about Batman's various deprivation experiments as they're just knocking out all of these like easy to fight criminals throughout the city, which I think is really funny because it kind of talks about the kind of mechanical part of Batman that we don't always get to see. Like, we don't need an issue anymore of Batman beating up the dog gang or whatever they're called here. That would be the Batman story that we would have seen in the Golden Age or the Silver Age. And it's kind of like a little joke that Morrison's making about like, yeah, somebody's still taking care of that stuff. It's what the boys do when they head out for the night, on their own. So I thought that was really interesting. But the other thing to bring in is that this is where the other issue from 52 that is in the beginning of the omnibus comes into play. That is issue number 30, because this person who breaks in and interrupts the dinner is a blindfolded man with 10 eyes in his hands, except for he's lost one of his fingers, so just 9. They're only tattoos, but mystically, or maybe just because he's doing some kind of Daredevil gag, he still sees everything, which made me think of the interesting question again, bringing it all back to acting that we've been talking from the beginning. Would Daredevil know immediately that Bruce Wayne is Batman? Harry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. Is this based on heartbeat? I'm getting too into.
I don't know. Based on everything, Fariha, what do you know?
No, it's based on smell. He knows. It's
Free always comes back to smell. His love language is smell.
It's his whole thing. It's smell is his whole thing, and then also like the voice, he can recognize the difference of the voice. Like he will know. He will know when Bruce talks, like or Batman talks, he will figure it out. Like he will know.
I was,
and then when Bruce talks, he will know that this is the voice shifted. He will know that. And then the thing is, he has this whole thing is like he can smell people's all the disease people have inside of him. That was his one thing in the Mark Waid's run when Foggy got cancer, which now leads to the question how he knows to stand next to Deadpool then, because
that's why they don't see it so often.
Yeah. But the thing is, he will know based on smell and the voice.
Well, the thing that made me think about that actually was this comment that you both made about how Jet kind of sees through him before she realizes in the kitchen, and that like, is it the voice? And it made me think that like Bruce does this thing when he's Bruce Wayne, but they're in a dangerous situation somewhere at some fundraiser or whatever. And you can see it very much in the movies, especially in Dark Knight, where he kind of like takes charge in a way that isn't fully identifiable as Batman, but it's way more intimidating than Bruce Wayne typically would be. And he usually points it just as an assailant so that the people around him like don't really notice. But in this instance, he's got to like move this guy like away from the table. And so he does it, but it's like in the moment of doing it, it's almost like both to the guy who I think already knows, but then also to Jet, like it's obvious that he's not Bruce Wayne. And it kind of just made me think of like Daredevil. And like in these moments, Bruce has to break the Bruce Wayne character a little bit, even if he's not fully being Batman, but that's where his, that's where Bruce Wayne begins to die in those moments. When did I die?
You're making me like this issue more, dude. I don't.
You do. You've been doing it to me on these issues.
I know.
So it's only fair that I do it back to you in return.
Okay, there we go.
But I mean, I don't know. Like to me, Bruce Wayne died long ago. Like at some point, like at some between his parents dying and between him coming back at Batman, he was gone. I think he never got over that, and that was that.
I think the questions raised here are answered in interesting ways, because I don't think this run like continues on the way that was probably initially planned, but like the questions I think are somewhat answered in interesting ways the further we go on. I'm kind of excited to see how we all feel as we get on the other end of this adventure near the end, but we'll have to wait on that.
Well, that is a perfect wrap up for this group of issues, which end with probably the most exciting shadow puppetry that we've seen in comics in quite some time. Woo. As Jet adds her own ears to Batman. All it takes, if anybody ever was just, if ever went to a kind of a party where he'd be voguing, he would be found out. And so she finally puts the last piece of the puzzle in and realizes that Bruce Wayne is Batman,
Is Batman.
or Batman is Bruce Wayne.
Dun dun dun.
That's the end of our discussion of this set of issues. I'm really excited to dig into the next issues because it feels like we've got the major villains, antagonists, foes, all kind of lined up here between these three men and Dr. Hurt and Black Glove and Talia, and it just feels like now the run is kind of ripe. It's ready to hit its stride. But who knows? Harry's saying that he has some mixed feelings about this next part of the run. So I haven't read ahead. I have no recollection of reading it the first time. It's all going to be a surprise to me. Fariha, why are we doing this? Getting together, reading Batman, all of this Batman, 3 omnibuses worth of Batman and a casebook and 2 trade paperbacks?
Why are we doing this? Maybe we want to fall in love with Batman. We want to figure out what's it about, and then also
we can change him.
Yeah, maybe we can change him.
Are you putting this on me again?
I don't want to know about when Bruce Wayne died. I want to understand more about why Batman lives.
Right, exactly. Like something along that line. Like we want him to be happy. We want him to be whole again, and so it's just part of that. And because also Harry told us to. So
yeah, Harry.
That's the important part. Thanks, guys.
Well, look, you can keep reading in the omnibus. As we have mentioned, we are going to go back for that whole resurrection of Ra's al Ghul. But if you read it already, or if you don't want to read it, whatever, we have no shame in that for you. But then we are going to continue to issues 676 through 681. And also, I believe there's a little insert from DC Universe 0 in the omnibus. So if you're reading digitally or in floppies, make sure you catch that little bit. But that's what we're going to be reading next time. And we are so excited to continue on our Crushing Comics book club for Grant Morrison's Batman. So for myself, on the behalf of also Fariha and Harry, thank you so much for listening and being part of this with us. And we look forward to getting to speak with you again. And until we do, we hope that you are well.